Baird, thanks for joining us.
It's a pleasure.
Now, you've had this job since September, taking on an aged care CEO role at an interesting time given the pandemic. Do you think the federal government's approach to aged care during the pandemic has been appropriate?
What I've seen from the federal government, and I've spent time with the department, I've spent time with the aged care minister, the treasurer and the prime minister, all of them are determined to make a significant difference in the sector. They've certainly, the aged care minister was absolutely across his brief and understanding of it, and was determined to use the Royal Commission to make a sort of generational reform, as is the Prime Minister and Treasurer. So, look, from my reflection, they have dealt with it as best they can. Are there learnings in terms of what has happened through this pandemic for the aged care sector and for the federal government and how they respond? Of course there are. But I think that they have absolutely given attention to it. They have moved with speed at times when required, and certainly in terms of the overall approach to the sector, what I'm seeing is a deep commitment to make a significant change, a generational change, I think, for some of the most vulnerable Australians who are our elderly.
That's interesting. One thing I'll sort of seize upon there is you rated Richard Colbeck. I mean, he's been found before in Senate committees and so forth not being on top of the detail. And I guess the council assisting the Aged Care Royal Commission at one point said there wasn't even a plan in place for COVID. Do you have a view on all of that? And from what you're saying, you actually think Richard Colbeck's up to it?
I'm just reflecting on my experience and what I've seen as a minister that's committed to his brief and was across the detail in the discussions that we had. I've seen it from the Treasurer, I've seen it from the Health Minister, and I've seen it from the Prime Minister, but I've also seen it from the opposition. I don't think aged care is a partisan issue. It's bipartisan. I think we have a collective responsibility to look after our elderly Australians, and I think what the Royal Commission has shown is that we have failed as a nation.
All right. Well, the Royal Commission, when it looked at COVID, it spoke of giving providers more money for staff for help with visitors, more money for infection control. In December, there was an announcement in relation to this $63 million worth of funding. Was it enough?
There's a huge amount still required, no doubt about it. And I think that what you've seen from the federal government is an acknowledgement that that is required. I think you've seen it from the opposition. You start with a couple of basic sort of facts. In terms of residential care, you have, on average, across the whole sector, there's over 3,000 providers. On average, in residential care, they are losing $10 a day per resident. Now, that's not sustainable. And when you then add in that actually what the community is wanting, more care, better care, well, you start to sort of look at the numbers and they start to add up. So there's no doubt that more money is required, but it's not just here's more money, let's solve it. It's how do you do that? And certainly I think, yes, we need more care and more capacity to provide care, but our care workers come back to that point. One of the things that I've seen in this role, I have just been in awe at what our care workers do, and I think that as a society we just haven't valued them.
You gave me a figure then about losing $10 a day per patient or whatever. Where do those figures come from, and how much does the federal government need to provide an extra funding, or does there need to be more in terms of the user pays model as well? How do you get the funding up?
Well, Stuart Brown provides industry benchmarking data, and that's from them, and that's sort of well known, and that's been provided to the Royal Commission. So the Royal Commission has seen that. The numbers, that works out to about $670 million a year is the number. But again, that doesn't mean that providers don't have to be more efficient in what they're doing, and I think that part of the reforms, we have to be very transparent and accountable. The providers have to be in terms of, how the money is being allocated and how they are actually providing and using those funds for care. But the numbers tell the real story. There is a shortfall. And
well, do you think you'll see that in the federal budget, that sort of extra spend?
Look, I mean, ultimately, that's my hope. I think the expectation would be there will undoubtedly be more money, but it's how it's allocated and how it's delivered. Long term, it's a significant financial challenge, and I understand, having sort of been in a sort of treasurer position, that the numbers that the current treasurer is looking at are very, very difficult. The federal budget is in absolutely financial challenges that are here for a significant period. But there are ways to provide the funding that is needed, and I'm sure that's where the government is turning their attention.
When there was the Victorian outbreak and the deaths there, and it got into aged care, Scott Morrison said, if it rains, people get wet. That if there is a COVID outbreak, people die in aged care. Is that fair? People talk about God's waiting room. Is that what aged care is? Is it a place where you get an outbreak and people are just going to die? It's as simple as that.
Well, I mean, let's talk about the waiting room first. Like I have to pick up on that. To me, that's one of the challenges we have. I think we have, childhood, adulthood, and then elderhood. Those who are elderly in Australia, we have left behind. And I think that what providers are trying to do, and what we should be trying to do as a nation, is trying to celebrate every moment and give our elderly the best possible lives they can. Live life to the full, maintain their independence, maintain their dignity, give them as many options as they can for as long as we can. I mean, in terms of the overall response, look, it's difficult. I think that yes, you can have the best possible plans, and I've certainly seen here at Hammondcare there was a pandemic plan in place. I mean, not everyone had that, but there was actually one here. It was developed back in 2009 and had to be adapted because it was a different pandemic that came through. Actions taken by some of the staff here, when there was an outbreak, there was sort of moved ahead of some of the health orders in terms of putting protections like face masks and other things in. So experience can play a role. We're not perfect in any way, and there are other providers that did very similar things. But certainly, governments can provide direction. I think the health departments have sort of learnt a lot from this process. There's undoubtedly going to be learnings.
They made mistakes?
Well, I think everyone's made mistakes. We have, providers have, governments have, not just here but across the world. Is
it true you had a visitor with COVID in one of your homes, and because of what you had in place or luck or whatever, you didn't have an outbreak?
Look, and I think luck is part of it, because you can have the best practice. I mean, this is a very contagious sort of virus. So you can have all the best things, but sometimes just luck is against you. But in this one, I think good management helped. And yes, here in Sydney, when the beaches sort of outbreak happened, one of our senior managers, Angela, who's been here a considerable period, made a decision as soon as she saw that, well, the proximity to our sort of facility in Warringah meant that we introduced face masks before they were required in that part of Sydney. And as it happened, the day later, someone from the outbreak who had COVID came to the facility, but they had the face masks, and they used the appropriate infection procedures, and that wasn't transmitted. Now, yes, that's good management, reflective of strong experience, but I'm not going to pretend that we're perfect. There is luck involved in those events as well. But experience matters, and I think that what we all now have, providers and government, is a huge amount of experience, and the thing is to learn from that and put sort of plans and actions in place to ensure that it doesn't happen again.
Now, people have spoken about you in federal politics, about taking on Zali Steggall in Warringah. Could that happen at the next election?
No. That's a pretty quick one.
No chance?
No chance.
Has Scott Morrison ever spoken to you about it?
No. No.
You're just not interested? Never ever?
No, well, of course I'm never going to say never, never, ever. I mean, look at Joe Biden. But I am not running. I won't be running. Is
that because you can't beat Zali Steggall?
No, I think what it's about is what I want to do here. And, from my point of view, I feel I've made a contribution to politics. This is an incredible opportunity. I have never been more excited in my life. It is an unbelievable privilege. So no, I won't be running for Warringah, but I am incredibly excited by what I'm doing.
Now, when you were Premier in 2014, you sacked, correct me if I'm wrong, more than 10 MPs, including ministers, after allegations at ICAC over illegal donations. Now, you find his successor, Gladys Berejiklian, in front of ICAC, accused of knowing one of her MPs, who she was in a relationship with, got a cut from developers for lobbying he's doing while he was her parliamentary secretary. What's your view on Maguire's alleged activities?
Well, I mean, I was shocked. That's no doubt about it. I mean, that was news to me, and I couldn't quite believe it. But you know, obviously, there's an inquiry that's ongoing, and you know, let that finish its work. But it's something that absolutely shocked me.
All right, I'm going to hand you an email. I'm just going to ask you about it. So it's obviously tabled in evidence. There you go, if you don't mind. This is an email tabled at the inquiry. It's from Daryl Maguire to your office when you were Premier. Mm-hmm. And I'll read it out, this will assist you. It says, yep. Here is why Stokes is making dopey, and dopey is misspelled, suggestions to get rid of NG, negative gearing, when there is a very clear failure, as you see in this correspondence. It needs just one deputy RMS to do their job and thousands more homes can be delivered. I can show you dozens of examples, and it says, please forward to the Premier. I've taken the matter up with RMS to help this guy. Now, this is about a property in Camellia, nowhere near his electorate of Wagga Wagga. Was this shown to you, or were you told about this?
Well, you're not going to be surprised that there is, you know, absolutely no recollection, you know, of that in any way.
Okay, sure. Now, you'll see at the top of that email, it's sent to your office, and it's then forwarded to Gladys Berejiklian's private email address, as if Daryl Maguire is saying, this is what I've sent Baird's office, and asked to go to the Premier. Now, again, this is not in Wagga Wagga, this developer's development. What do you make of that?
Well, I think there's been enough said about these sort of events. You know, I can assure you, I know nothing about it. I don't know why that would have been forwarded to the current Premier, but I think that she's responded on that in significant detail.
Gladys Berejiklian, if ICAC finds against her or criticises her, should she resign?
Well, that's, I mean, a matter for her and hypothetical. I think, you know, this is an ongoing inquiry. The Premier has been sort of very open in her response. And look, you know, my position is clear. I was as shocked as anyone when I saw what had taken place. At the same time, I know that the current Premier is of the highest integrity. She has always been about good public policy, and I was proud to work alongside her, and I remain so.
But you wouldn't abide this when you were Premier, would you? You wouldn't abide one of your MPs going around lobbying for developers while they're at PALSEC, presumably, would you?
Well, of course that's not something that I would in any way have condoned, and I certainly don't think the Premier has. And I think in relation to...
Well, she says that if you act within the rules, it's fine, and she's making out she believed it was within the rules.
Well, you know, that's obviously... I think that she has answered many questions, and I think, you know, from my point of view, I don't really have any more comments to add.
I'll just ask this finally. Did Daryl Maguire, did you ever have a funny feeling about him?
Look, I'm not sort of going to get into sort of personal reflections. I think what I have seen is totally unacceptable. I think the ICAC has shown that, and my hope is it's a good reminder to everyone in public positions that their primary responsibility is to care and look after those they're given the privilege to lead, and their motivation should be that, and it should be nothing else.
Mike Baird, thanks for your time.